So we just did a not hostile take, an
takeover.
unhostile takeover.
Hostile takeover.
A peaceful takeover.
That's what they all say. Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast, the award-winning podcast because I said so. So words. See, I'm good. Great host. This is why we won an award. We clearly won the Process Award for Best Podcasting because that's how this works. At some point there will be an actual copy and pasted intro in these things, but that day is not today. But this is the day I have my process partner in crime, my poetry partner in crime, my just in general partner in crime with me. We have Kayla. Hello. Hello. How are you doing?
Me. I'm good. How are you?
I think I should legitimately be the first person in doing who's asked me back how I'm doing, so I appreciate that. I think so, yeah. We've been in...
Well, everyone's rude except for me.
It's been very formal of late. And speaking of rude, and this is where my wonderful segue goes into restarting the podcast.
Oh, wait, no, I had something to say before that, actually.
Go.
Because you consistently refer to me as an award-winning writer and director.
Yes.
I have never won an award for my writing or directing in my life. I've won second place for things. I've been shortlisted for things, but I've never actually won an award.
You've won my award.
Thank you.
There we go.
I'll take that. That's nice.
Your
segue, go on. Yes.
No, I mean, well, it doesn't matter too much. That was, again, wonderful noise for all the ASMR listeners there as Tyrone figures out his words, but the way I've challenged myself to start these off, and I'm aware of what I'm getting into now with you especially, is I've challenged myself for all of these podcasts to try and remember how I first met the person I've got on the show with me.
I know exactly how we first met.
Exactly, and I don't like this story for me.
Should I not tell it then?
No.
You brought it up.
No, I want it told.
Okay,
It's very
great.
aware. I don't come out of this looking great.
No, but this is what I mean when I'm on stage at Process and I say that I'm the nice, approachable, lovely one and you're a bitch.
Yep.
Because I love you, but you are a bitch sometimes. And the story of when we first met is a great example. It was October 2017.
Oh, you've got months with it. You've got receipts.
Yes, October 2017. And I won the... I was competing in the Genesis Slam.
Ooh, okay, so I will have to come back on this episode slightly because that was the first time we interacted with each other.
Oh, yes. It was the first time we met, but you'd seen me perform previously.
I'd seen you perform before.
Yeah,
yes.
You'd seen me. It couldn't have been much earlier.
Yeah, it was like, I think it was like a month before Spoken Word London.
Yes. And I was competing in Genesis Slam, and it was my first time, and I won. Humble brag. And you were standing by the bar, and you were leaning on the bar with your signature, like one-armed lean. And exactly, you're doing it right now. And you were like tapping on your phone, and I remember thinking like, super rude that you're on your phone, and like I thought you were like messaging or something while people
even
are
worse.
performing. And then the thing is, this makes you also sound way worse than you actually are.
I know.
You're not this much of an asshole. It makes you look really bad. Sorry. And I went over to say hello because I was like, I don't want you to be as much of a prick as I think you are being right now. So I just went over to say hi after one of the. It was like during an interval or something, or maybe like right at the end. And you were like making notes on everyone's performances on your phone about what you thought of the poetry, which I don't think is inherently bad, but it sounds bad when you say it out loud. I don't actually think that's a bad thing. I just think it sounds bad. And you told me later, I don't know if you told me that night, but you told me like at some point that you were like reluctant to accept that I was good, and that the first poem I did, I think I even remember what I did. I think I did the Motelinski poem first, and then Let Me Explain, and then Real Women.
I feel like Will Women was one of the first ones, possibly.
No, I think I won with that one. Or maybe Let Me Explain I won with. But those are definitely the three that I did. And I remember you said that the first poem I did, you were like, yeah, all right. And then the second poem I did, you were like, I don't know. And then the third poem, you were like, oh, yeah, all right, fuck you, you're actually good.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are you reluctant to admit that people are good? I'm a good poet.
Yeah.
Poets are great.
Like, I'm a wonderfully jaded poet at this stage in, like, not fully jaded, but that thing of like, I have heard so many poets before, and there's a little part of me, which is my cynical, bitter part of me, that's a bit like, we're doing another poem on this subject again, and like, it's good, but I've heard this done so many times, and I guess it's more in it was almost, especially at that stage, there was a level of like, I had heard that poem like that so many times. I'm looking for something that is different. And I think with your Will Women Have Curves one at the time, like, and I've got a similar story with Rebecca Cooney as well with her 3-Day Beard poem.
Oh, I love that poem so much.
Which was, because like she did that poem after the one of the many French riots, etc.
Yeah.
And it was like, at first I was like, oh no, we're doing another cliche again. Okay, could we get ready for the cliche poem? And then the poem goes on and it's like, shit, that wasn't a cliche.
Nope.
Okay, fair enough, that's
Not
good.
at all.
And I think it was a little bit like that with Will Women Have Curves. So like, we're going to get another cliche poem, like, look at me, I am woman, which is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But that poem genre has been done so many times and often not elevated.
Yeah.
So the fact that there was some elevation was like okay, fine.
Yeah.
You got something.
It was also because the title is misleading.
Yes.
Because obviously, Real Women Have Curves is a bullshit sentence. It's satire. It's a heavily satirical poem. But I can imagine hearing that title and going, oh, right, here we go again.
And that was and that is often part of my thing, especially in slams, which we might get onto later. Little preview spoiler. I don't know. We'll see. But before we get into that, we're starting with a section I always do called Timelines. See, that is the sound of someone who's really happy to I can do words.
No, it's not that I'm not happy. It's just that I'm repeating the story that I told on the Dead Darlings podcast.
Well, yeah, I can ask Rebecca Cooney if we can just cut and paste that topic from here. That'd be perfect. But no, we're doing it fresh again. So let's see what slight variations there are to your past and like. At least, at the very least, I'm assuming with all the theatre stuff as well. I'm calling all the theatre stuff for now, but with
all the theatre stuff.
With the creativity, there's a level of you've always been a creative person.
Yeah, I've always been a writer. Theatre came much later, but I've been writing poetry since before I can remember, and I know that because when I was like 5, I wrote a poem about soda, soda pop. That my parent, I think my mum like printed out like loads of copies against with her friends, and I know that wasn't the first poem I wrote. And I was 5, and I've been writing poems and stories since I was that, like, I assume since I was capable of doing that physically. And everyone always said I was going to be a writer. I say everyone, like everyone that knew me as a child was like, Kayla's going to be a writer. And my grandma was like obsessed with, she was so certain I was going to be a journalist. And my grandmother loved the theatre. But she was still insistent that I was going to be a journalist. And I went to uni to study. The reason I ended up studying theatre was because I was always going to study psychology. And I was like, I wanted to be a therapist. And I was like, writers don't make any money. I'll be a therapist and I'll write on the side. And then I went to see a production of King Lear with my A-level drama class. In 2011, it was starring Derek Jacobi at the Donmar Warehouse, directed by Michael Grandage. And I was like, I don't know, I want to do that. I want to, whatever's going on here, I want to do that for the rest of my life. So I went home and changed I'd written my personal statement for psychology. I just went home and changed my application and studied theatre at the University of Leeds. And in the first couple of weeks of uni, I made a friend, or sort of friend, called, if you're listening to this as a podcast, Tyrone is making his signature confused face right now. No, I made a friend in that I thought I saw this another poet called Finn Dobson, and I saw them in like one of my first lectures, and I was like, this person is super cool and I want to be their friend, but I didn't really know how to be their friend. So I would just like, in lectures, I'd be like, is this seat taken? Can I sit with you? And then, like, a couple of weeks later, I found out that they were doing exactly the same thing. So we just became friends. But they were sitting on top. There was like a little hill, like a very small hill outside our faculty building. And they were sitting there alone, flipping through our like student union, like the book of like societies. And I said, oh, can I sit here? And a classic, please be my friend move. And they had circled slam poetry. And I said, what's slam poetry? And they explained about spoken word. So our university had a spoken word society, but it didn't do anything the whole year. And I had also taken a creative writing module that year outside of like an elective. And so Finn and I and a bunch of our friends went to the student union. We were like, the society is run by third years who aren't doing anything with the society. and they haven't held an AGM to pass it over to anyone. So this society is going to disappear if no one does anything with it. So we just did a not hostile take, an unhostile takeover.
Hostile takeover.
A peaceful takeover.
That's what they all say.
And they said you can do it, but you have to have an AGM right at the start of next year. So we revamped the society and then like a couple of years later it won like best student society. So like, I'm not saying it's because of us, but it's probably because of Talia Stitcher because she then went on to run it. And then when I moved back to London for my master's, I started going to Spoken Word London and Extra Second London and Genesis Slam and then I got back into spoken word poetry here. And I sort of fell out of spoken word. What I really regret is that I did a year abroad in Montreal in my third year, and then I lived in New York for 4 months in the summer to work for a theatre company. And there's such an incredible spoken word scene in both Montreal and New York, and I didn't go to a single event in either of those cities when I lived there. Biggest regret. That's not on the Dead Darlings podcast. You can have that for free.
Exclusive. We got an exclusive for the Protest podcast. Well, I don't know what you talked about fully on the Dead Darlings podcast, but going into it from past, but now going into the present. So how would you describe your present as a writer?
Well, I run Process Poetry Night with you. That's on the last Tuesday of every month. And if you're listening to this or watching this, you should come along. I intermittently go to other poetry nights because I'm very, very busy. I wish I could go to more. But I also live in a really inconvenient... I live in Northwest London, like at the end of a tube line. There's like one poetry night that's near me, that goddamn poetry jam, and it's still almost an hour away. So
weird, because how close are you to Barnet?
I live in Barnet, but getting around Barnet is
awkward. Because at your Edgewood, I know there's a one monthly night in High Barnet.
Yeah, it's the other end of it's the other branch. So
exactly.
I think I can get a bus there, but it's still like at least 40 minutes. Like there's nothing really in my area, whereas in East London and South London, there's that you could, wherever you live, there's going to be somewhere a night really close to you. I attend other nights like fairly infrequently, but I'm kind of getting back into it, and I always have them like in my diary, so I know when they are. And so when if you're listening to this and I've ever told you, oh, I've really been wanting to come to your poetry night, I genuinely mean that. It means that it's in my diary, and then I have work and I can't come. I have a book coming out at the end of the year with Verve Poetry Press. So I write for The Page. I always say, I describe myself as a director and writer for The Page, stage and screen, even though I've never had anything on screen. Yet.
I mean, this podcast is coming out end of August. I don't know how my time is, but by then, I don't know.
Well, actually, no, that's not true. I wrote a short play that they made into a short film once. A while ago, but other than that, I have not written for the screen. Not for lack of trying. Screenwriting's really hard.
I guess like for not cliche, but for in terms of your writing, in terms of your present versus past, like what would you say has changed in terms of your writing, and like is it topic wise? Obviously, when I first met you had a lot of stuff talking about womanhood there. Like, has that changed much now? Has it evolved?
Yeah, I think my main sort of topics for writing when we met, I was doing a lot of poems about mental health and a lot of poems about womanhood. I would say my poems about womanhood have evolved to being poems about gender more generally. Primarily because my relationship to my own gender has changed or has evolved maybe, but also I have way more non-binary friends than I did 6 years ago. I did have non-binary friends 6 years ago, but now like every other friend I have is non-binary. So, and I'm writing a bit more now about specific things that are happening. I am in general writing a lot less poetry at the moment. I don't know why that is. I think I possibly just classic writer's block.
I mean, there is also the directing and other stuff you're doing as well, which can take up a lot of the time.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah. It does. Sorry, that was... I don't know if I have a comment on that. I have less free time now as well. I read a lot more poetry now than I did 6 years ago. And I'm also, because I'm also now I'm writing more for stage, for theatre, which means poetry comes by the wayside. I think I wrote the most in lockdown, but I think that's probably true for everyone.
Yeah.
Possibly during my masters and then during lockdown.
But like then looking forward to the future then and going to the end, not end of this section, but like going to the future just in general of like, where do you see your writing going? Obviously with you doing stuff for the stage, screen, all of that. Are you looking to just continue growing there writing wise, or is like, it's like, at least with poetry, for example, is poetry going to be the thing on the side you want to do more as a career, or other things taking career, or is it all very fluid and will flow into each other? What are your future goals and plans? Tell me your dreams. Tell me everything.
My dreams. Do you know what? That I have so many thoughts on that. Because many years ago, I think it was at the National Student Drama Festival, and I think it was Sean Lennon, who was at the time, I think, an associate director at the Old Vic. Maybe or at the Lyric, whatever. He's a great director. He said, and I think that was in my final year of uni, and he said something really helpful that I didn't understand at the time. He said, keep your art and your career separate. And I was like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. I make theatre for it. I'm gonna be a director. Like, that's my art and my career. What are you talking about? And now I absolutely understand what he meant, because directing for stage and screen and writing for theatre is my career. That's something that for which I have goals and somewhat timelines, and that I invest a lot of my time in, that I make the bulk of my income from. I don't really want that for poetry, because it's something that's very precious for me, and also is it's a lot less political. It's a lot less, I don't want to have to compromise on anything. I want to do it my way. And the only way I can do that is by keeping it protected as not necessarily a hobby. I wouldn't even call it a hobby, but I would call it something that career adjacent is sometimes how I describe it. It's like, it's not work, but I do sometimes make money from it. It's like, it's a love thing. I don't really know. But it's, so if I'm keeping my art and my career separate, like, yes, my directing is very much an art, and it is my art, but it is not my art, capital M, capital A, and keeping my poetry, having something creative that I keep protected as I do this my way. And if you don't want, if that means that you don't want to pay me to do it, that's fine. Also, having a quote unquote career in poetry is not impossible, but a sort of nebulous thing, because most writers, most authors of prose or poetry, or like published authors, don't make the bulk of their money off their books or even readings of poetry. They make their money off speaking engagements and teaching. So I think that's also worth bearing in mind. This has gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I feel very strongly about this, about career. You asked me a direct question, I did not answer it.
Tangents are fine, and like, it's one of those things as well of like, I fully agree with you in a lot of that. It's that thing of, it's not to say that even in your career that there can't be any elements of that become capital M, capital A, my art. Yeah. Like, there will be, when you do get a little bit more freedom and stuff, it is a bit of like, I'm going to add in a little bit of something of like, I like that. And like, I feel that with some of the work I do, obviously as a video editor, it is a creative thing, but obviously it's with clients and feedback and all that stuff. And there are the odd jobs when it's like, you have freedom to do whatever you want to, kind of thing. And it's like, I can almost flex a little bit or do something a bit more me in here. And like, it's not in that divide of my art and my career that they are a complete divide and cannot ever cross over in any way, shape or form. There will be some things that, like, so many things are fluid and will have parts that will flow into it. Similarly as well with the whole career adjacent side of things, there will also be some of that was like, cool, well, this is a moment when it's got to be a bit more career focused, because like, yes, this is fun, but also I do need to, if you're going to ask me to do a thing, can I get money for this? Because it's nice to get money sometimes for some of the things. So
Yeah, that also I think has levels to it, because there are poets who are like, this is my whole career, it's my whole thing, it's the main thing that I'm gonna make my income from, and I do think like it's not always about the fee for you, it's about setting a precedent for this is the fee if you have to pay, like that you have to pay for this. Also, especially if the the event that's putting on is going to make money for it, they have to it's there's admin costs associated with like planning any kind of event, like poetry nights and whatever, but people only come because you've got performers or because they want to perform. I've just knotted that whole thing in my head. My brain's just gone in a circle. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's a thing of like, I think about it a lot, and because poetry is so nowhere close to my main time income or thing, I am very comfortable doing this for fun, and I will call it more of a hobby at times, because I do find this is a fun hobby. I have to find that balance between this is a fun hobby, but I can't, just because I can afford to say doing something for a slightly reduced fee, or even things like, I like taking pictures at people's events, so I will do that as a fun little favour for a friend sometimes, but I almost have to make it clear, this is my favour to you. This is me doing a nice thing. This is not the thing that should be the standard. I am just doing this out of the goodness of my heart.
Yeah.
As a career, and other people, they need to be paid a certain amount, and I don't want to take away from how much people should be paid and earning.
Yeah, which is interesting, because once, I think you posted like an Instagram story once about saying like your favourite hobby, and it was photography, and I was like, really? Not poetry? And you were like, that's different. Which is interesting.
I mean, to be fair, I do probably enjoy, I don't say that I enjoy photography more, but like, I consider poetry a hobby, and I think part of why I can't call poetry my favourite hobby is because so much of it is now, not say burdened by the career side of it, but the career side of it has definitely become a part of it that I can't, like, I view it as a hobby, but it's never always just fun, whereas photography, for the most part, at least at that time, was just fun. There was no pressure for anything. There was no...
Yeah.
As much as I've got a good reputation with my photography, it wasn't like, oh, you're... In that vein... In the ego way of people saying, oh my God, you're Tyrone Lewis and I built a name up for myself in poetry.
Humble brag.
I've not got that same reputation in photography, and I can have that as much more of a little niche thing that is my little hobby and thing, and especially because of how I do it in my home studio here, it is often a level of friends come down for the day, and our thing for the day happens to be taking pictures, where some friends will be, we'll play PS5, whereas poetry, whilst it's still fun, is
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. There's a thing with poetry sometimes feels like a two-way thing, and it sometimes feels like a one-way thing. But it isn't it's a conversation in some ways, but it's a conversation where one person is people that can only really share things one at a time.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Unless you do collaborative poems, but then it is two people sharing something with everyone else, and it's sort of like they're the one side of the conversation.
And like, as much as you can write poems to yourself at home, etc., there is still a level of, I'm not saying that you're not a poet if you just write to yourself, but there is some level of, especially unsurprisingly, we're doing the spoken word side of things because we are performers, there's a part of it, it's like we need an audience to perform it to, otherwise
You say that, but I remember in like second year of uni being up at like drunk at 2 a.m. with my housemates reading poems to each other.
But but my point being that there needs to be someone on the listening and audience in that general third of someone to listen to it rather than legitimately actually in crowd audience in that way.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
So like, again, you can write poems at home on your own. I'm not saying you're not a poet in that way, but there is definitely a bit of like, who's this going to someone to go to kind of thing. And I think that's what, not that poetry needs it, but it feels definitely more of a thing in that kind of, I mean, photography is the same as well because I need to post a picture somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I think beautiful things. It's like sort of like if I read a poem aloud in an empty room and no one hears it, is it a poem? Like, yeah, it is. Like, I read other people's poetry aloud to myself sometimes because if I'm reading a poetry collection, I don't immediately get it in my head. Sometimes I have to read it out loud, and I'm like, oh no, I get this.
I feel that of like sometimes saying the words out loud. Now I understand it. And like I'm reading, they're the same words.
Yeah.
I've read them, but just
Like, well, I mean, it also depends on the poet. Like some poets really, like reading their work. I'm like, I read them and I'm like, this really demands to be spoken aloud. But I have a really vivid imagination, so I can sometimes like just hear things in my head. Like I can read K Tempest in my head and feel like I'm reading it aloud, if that makes sense, just because their poems just kind of leap off the page. But
my mum has asked me to read one of my poems from my book to her because she's not heard me say it out loud, and level of like she wants to hear where I'd put my inflections in the poem, etc.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting about reading, because you and I at 2 gigs now together, or you've headlined together twice. I like headlining with you, it's quite nice. But I like our game of like reading each other's poems out loud, because like my poems sound so different in your style of performing, and vice versa. And I remember the first time we did that, and I picked the most Jewish poem to give you, and you picked the blackest poem to give me, which hasn't aged well. This anecdote hasn't aged well because it was your Kanye poem.
I will still do that. I'm not that bad. No comment, actually. No comment.
You wouldn't make me read that poem out loud again. No.
Where are you going?
I don't know.
Well, I will use that as a good time to go for the end of this section, and we're now going to go into our conversational section called Let's Talk About.
Awesome. What are we talking about?
Now is the section called Let's Talk About, where we will talk about a subject and see... I mean, it's been... I was going to say 6 episodes. Now this is now guaranteed. This will be the 6th episode. It's been 6 episodes now. Excellent. I can future plan. And this is where you've seen we go off tangent a few times. So we'll pick a topic to start with. And the topic we're going to start with is competition. So as we officially met during a poetry slam, I feel that's a good one to talk over. See, good hosting sometimes. Great.
It's a
occasionally.
Callback.
Exactly. But yeah, I guess in general, what are your thoughts on competition in, let's say, writing in general?
I have so many thoughts about this, because also I know exactly why I feel the way I do, and specifically the way I feel the way I do is because when I won Genesis Slam, I'd never competed in a slam in my life, and I won Genesis Slam. And then if you win one of the slams throughout the year, you compete against all the other winners in the final in December. You know this, because you've done it so many times.
Nevertheless, for the podcast listeners and viewers, if they don't, if
for
not
my
aware.
Parents who will listen to this. So you're competing against other people who've all won the same thing you have. And you were in that final as well. And I remember so vividly, and like the Genesis Slam in particular is very arbitrary because they just pick 5 random judges from the audience. So it's like, which I think is the best way to do it, to be honest, because it's like, you know, nobody's a quote unquote expert. Like, these are just people who've come here to enjoy poetry. There's no bias. Like, they take off the top score and the bottom score, average the middle 3. I think randos is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think my opening poem for the first round was the one that had won me in the 3rd round in October. And then after the first round, when they read out people who'd gone through, you got through this first round and I didn't. And I remember it so clearly because you just went, yes, next to me. And I felt like I was going to cry. I think my eyes welled up and I just looked at the ceiling because I was like, if you cry at this, you're fucking pathetic.
God.
I was so mad that I was so upset. And then I was like, because Genesis Slam, I think is I say this, and I was about to say it's the only slam I would ever compete in.
As the expert on all slams, who's someone who's been to every single slam, continue the comment.
Like, personally, I love the way they do it, because the whole vibe is, this doesn't mean anything. It's a game. It's a parlor game. It's something fun. You know, they're something they say a lot on the night is applaud the poet, not the points. And
the point is not the point. The point is the poetry.
Exactly. And because it doesn't matter. Art is subjective. Poetry especially. Like, we have an inside joke. We have a running joke of 2 two Jews, three opinions. And I think it's the same with poets. I think it's two poets, three opinions. So I knew all of that, and I was still really upset. So, and my mum was there. So I lost in front of my mum. But I was like, but all my mates have gone through. So why? I'm like, anyway. And it just really crushed me. And I was like, I never want to feel this way again. And I realized that I just put so much pressure on myself being to be a good poet. And because Real Women went viral as well, and I started I got recognized like at work, like people on the bar who'd seen me perform it various nights. And I was like, and I kind of thought I was hot shit. And then I felt like I got crushed, and I was like, I don't need to be hot shit, and I don't think it's good for me. Not as a poet, certainly. Maybe as a playwright, as a director, great. But like as a poet, it's not good for me. It's not what I want poetry to be for me. So I just decided, I was like, no, I cannot look at it this way. I need poetry to be protected. And I think especially because I quite firmly view poetry as a community and not an industry. Because most poets who are career poets often make most of their money doing other things, like as I said, or they'll branch out and also write novels, or also like Kay Tempest also writes plays, also puts out albums.
You look at Inoue Ellams and how successful Inoue has been in the theatre world. Not that he's not been successful in the poetry world, but
no, but Inoue Ellams has become like a much better known name from his plays. So I'm not saying poetry is not important or poetry is like a starter pack. It's not. Poetry is gorgeous and beautiful and wonderful in its own right. But there are far fewer readers and viewers of poetry than there are readers and viewers of other work. And that has been the case for a very long time. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. So I want to keep it protected. And I think competition, if you're viewing, prizes and awards and, winning slams as a marker that you are a good poet, that that your work is the best, or that you are the best performer, I don't think that it's going to help you or your poetry. That is my opinion. That is not a fact. I just I do also kind of feel this way about like plays and films and stuff, and books. Actually, I feel this way about a lot of art forms. Like I read a book recently that's won loads of awards. I kind of, what? Fuck it.
It's the process. The award-winning process podcast.
So I read "This Is How You Lose the Time War," which had been recommended by like every book person that I follow on the internet. Everyone's been raving about it. It then went like mainstream viral on Twitter, and it's like it's queer-coded science fiction post-apocalypse. I'm like, yes, this is made for me. And I read it, and I really, really didn't like it. And I was like, am I stupid? And I was like, no, I just think this book is bad. Opinion, not fact. But I know exactly why I didn't like it as well. I can pinpoint exactly what I think would have made it better. But like, I really didn't like it. It's won loads of awards. Like, there are plenty of pieces of art and in every medium that win loads of awards and just are not good. There are loads of films that have won Oscars that I think are absolute dog shit. Like, there's, every time I read a lot of the books that are on like the women's fiction prize, a shortlist or long list, and I like half the time I think these are amazing, prize winning, this book should win, great, and half the time I'm like, this is bad. Other books are better. What are you talking about? Art is subjective. It's also, the poetry community is small. It's pockets of communities in various cities around the world. They don't really communicate with one another. Like, a famous poet in New York is not going to be a famous poet in London. Like, if you get the slam poet, the like, award, the best spoken word poet in New York. There
are like 5 or 6 named poets that can go a grant. Yuri Francisco's, etc., are one of like the few poets, and I've seen it from evidence. Yuri Francisco's, damn it,
Holly McNish. Yeah. If Holly McNish went to headline a poetry night in New York, I could be wrong. Maybe she's more internationally famous than I think.
So Holly is almost in that 5. The Holly McNish is Yuri Francisco. At the very I'd say so, yes. Given that
Yeah.
Holly does do a lot of touring, I think her touring is also international as well as UK based. And like,
Okay.
I think Holly McNish, your Rudy Francisco's, Shane Koizan, that's what I'm thinking of.
Shane Koizan.
Yeah.
Right, Shane Koizan. But I don't think he could come here now. I think 10 years ago, if Shane Koizan came
literally
here,
10 years ago, he did come here. We
Right.
did see him. He did do sellout shows here.
yeah, but his, to this, because to this day went viral.
Like,
So,
you've
but
got
now I don't
maybe
think
your
he'd
Buddy
have that.
Wakefield, but there's the point being, there's a couple of poets that can do that, but it's...
Neil Hilborn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Kay. I think people would see Sarah Kay anywhere in the world.
Yes. But, so, on a lot of this, I've got a couple of tangents, and I'll see how many I actually do stick to. There is always in the same way that people say the point is not the points, the point is the poetry, there is, I think, a slightly harmful one that goes around of the best poet doesn't win a slam. I think that's a very harmful one. I get the sentiment behind it to some degree, but I think it's a bit harmful.
It goes along with the thing of like slam, comedy does better in slams. Funny poems win slams. I'm like, I don't think that's always true. I've seen plenty of really heartfelt, heart-wrenching poems win slams. Like, my poems aren't that funny, or at least I don't think they're very funny. Sometimes other people think they're funny, and that's very nice. But I've won slams with really depressing poems.
In recently at the time of I'm trying to think of when I'm posting this and when I'm recording this. At the time of recording it, the last Genesis Slam, Jake Nathan won it, and his last poem was a poem about Grenfell.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, that's not a comedy poem, but like, so I will push back on that to some degree on the whole best poet doesn't win a slam. But also what I will say is, and it's a conflicting thing almost of, I really love having the audience judge slams. I think that's really good. And I think it's a really good thing to have poets properly be judged on how well is it affecting the audience, how well the audience are responding to it. Because we talk to ourselves too much. Poets talk to poets too much. And I think it's good that we're talking to an audience and the audience is judging us. The challenge for me, and this is a thing that, which is also just a thing in art in general of, as someone who writes their own art, makes their own art, I will occasionally see some things that to me feel very on the nose and basic and not deep enough, not really challenging or pushing. I didn't say or mention anyone. I was not even thinking of anyone in particular at that point. But I will see some pieces of work that I think to me feel a little bit surface level. But for an audience, that is the best thing they've heard.
Yeah.
And it's that challenge of, I think that's shit. I think that I could have written that poem. I didn't write it. So
yeah, that's all modern art.
That's
all modern art is. It's, I could have done that, but I didn't.
Yeah. But like, there is that side of things, or like that thing of like, either some level of, I could have written it, but someone I haven't, or some level of, I've heard these 5 poets do it better.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I have to try and tell myself at the level of, but they're not here today. That doesn't matter that they've done it better. It's, for me at least, in a level of, well, I'm not going to say that poem's the best poem, because I personally don't think it's the best poem. And that's fully valid. But it's also equally valid that that audience member who's judging it today does think it's the best poem.
Yeah, and I think that is what's really valuable, because about audiences judging slams and like the whole... Sorry, I'm about to burp down the mic. I'm so sorry. That was the most pathetic burp. Is that I think poets sometimes forget who we're writing for. I'm not writing poetry for just poets. And I think there is a specific poet who I guess most people will know I have beef with. He doesn't know I have beef with him, but I do.
Yeah, we're with you.
And one of the things that I have beef with is the fact that he thinks poetry should be inaccessible and that we should make the readers work for it. And I'm like, I don't want that in poetry. When I read poetry, I'm happy to do a certain amount of work, but no more than I would do for a novel or a play. No more or a non-fiction book. I'm not prepared to like investigate, to go in with a fine tooth comb and figure out what the fuck you're talking about. And like I know I want my poetry to be enjoyed by anyone, not everyone, because that's not possible, but anyone. And people have said that they like my poetry, that they don't normally like poetry, but they like mine because I write how I speak, which isn't true. But I do write more how I speak than this poet that I have beef with. And, you know, like the way that some people have put it before, that you and I have very conversational styles of poetry. And the people that like our poetry, which is plenty of people, like that. The people that don't. And that's fine. But I think people that judge slams are often very kind of look too deep. I'm like, do people enjoy it? Is it, you know, is it doing something that you haven't seen today? Has it reached you? Can you see what that poet... I think the one thing I will say is that it frustrates me when you say surface level. I think you and I mean slightly different things, but when I think surface level, I think I don't know what this poet's opinion is. I don't see that person in the poem they've just given me. They've talked about something so broad without... But then I talked to my mum about this, and my mum was like, why should you have to put yourself in a poem? And I was like, valid point.
So. Well, yeah, so for me, at least with that, again, it's also part of my Tyrone's personal opinion of things is my personal opinion and what I value, and this is, again, my value thing rather than saying something's not good if it doesn't do this, but my thing I value is I love something when it's like, either you put yourself in it, but like some level of that poem is only something you can write.
Yeah,
I value
that's why,
that.
yeah, exactly.
And like some of that can be... It's your personal story, so you're in it, and only you can write that. Only you your story. Yeah. Some of that can be just the way you write, the way you talk, etc.
Yeah, a great example. Sorry, you
go.
A great example is Tim Kiley's poem about Andrew Tate, where he performs the poem as if he's Andrew Tate, and like you might not get who Tim Kiley is from that poem, but you'll certainly get how Tim Kiley feels and about Andrew Tate, how Tim Kiley thinks that no one else would do. Like, so it's like I don't have to see into your soul, but I want to know something about you that I didn't know before, and that might just be your sense of humor, your way of speaking. And
this is my thing with when I say the surface level poems and the stuff that doesn't well in slam, not to diss these poems, because they have their place, they've got value, and also as well a valid point of all this level of I have no idea what level of the writer these people where they are in their writing journey. Some of them could be their first poem, and God knows how many of my first poems were surface level or whatever, but like that thing of you've done your poem and like you basically your poem's basic theme is racism is bad, and it's like I agree with you. Are you going to say anything more than that? No, you're not. You're just saying racism is bad. It's like okay, it is. Oh, that's it. Oh, that's all we're doing. Okay, then. And for me, I'd want more from that, but obviously, that's me as a personal opinion thing. And like some people, especially audiences that come to slams, today that's all they needed to hear, and like. Just to not move the conversation on, but to ask a question so it's not just me ranting.
Or me ranting. This is just how we have normal conversations, though. And I'm thinking, like, are people interested in the conversation?
They do, because parasocial relations is the thing.
Yeah. But although I do remember once on the train home from Process, you and I were having pretty much this exact style of conversation, and someone who's now a Process regular, part of the family, was just meeting us for the first time, was just listening to our conversation. I was like, I'm really sorry, we're not normally like this. And then I thought, yeah, we fucking are.
I mean, like, to be fair, that's part of the conceit I had with Process to begin with, and the idea of we have these conversations in a bar that we all enjoy listening or being a part of, so just put it online was part of the conceit anyway. Anyway, question.
Yes. Ask me.
The whole conceit behind poetry slams was to bring poetry to the audience again. There was a movement in the 80s started by Mark Smith in Chicago to try and basically make poetry more for the people again, and that's what slams were started with. And with that, it was giving something back to the audience. And I'm looking at the scene, making a generalization, but one with some knowledge behind it, that slams do often tend to get a lot of people to them more than a lot of open mic nights. And I say that to rephrase that. Slams get a lot of people who aren't poets to them more than open mic nights do. And like you look at the audiences at slams and like things like Genesis, etc., which gets a fairly regular audience. Even things like you also look at things like Hammer and Tongue Hackney, etc. And like they are audiences that will be often full of people that aren't poets. And I think that's a thing.
Cage matchy, isn't it?
It is. But like that's the thing that slams are good for, and that competition element to them entices the audience. You look at the Roundhouse Slam, for example, and that's one of the Roundhouse's biggest, not biggest night, but like it's been a regular on the Roundhouse's stage for 18, 19 years, and it is that thing of we all know as poets it's not the point to win them, but it gets people into the room. So where are you on that?
That's a valid point. I hadn't thought about it. I don't think slams are bad. I just think there's so much pressure put on it. Like, I feel a bit bad actually, but he's been nice to me since then, so I think he's forgiven me. The first time that I met Matt Salby at
oh yes
at Process, and you were like, oh, the Unislam champion, and I like on stage I was like, yeah, that's really nice, but it doesn't mean anything. I didn't say exactly. I said it in a much nicer way. I think I did I was like, oh, it's so nice that this is that's what I did. I said afterwards, we were talking, when I came up after he finished, and I said something like, winning a slam doesn't actually mean anything, so it's really nice to like see a slam winner that's actually really great. I did what you did when we met. And what was the question you asked me?
Feelings and audiences coming to slams, and
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think the pressure that people put on themselves, and that I put on myself as well, of like, once you win one slam you have to win them all, and it's like how I don't think they're a bad time in general. I don't think they're bad at all. I just think the way that we do them, I just don't think it should be about the competition element. I think or at least I like that Genesis is like, this is a competition, but it's like a competition in as much as like winning a game of cards is a competition. Like, you want to win, but it doesn't actually mean that you're only good at cards.
Like,
sorry, that's really reductive. I don't even know. That just came out of my mouth, and I don't actually believe that.
So, just for I like competition as a general thing, and I kind of like competition in poetry, if only for looking like I think with competition, one of the things as well as also the asterisk beside a lot of this stuff of like healthy competition. Healthy competition, I think, is really good, and I think that is, and like part of it for me, I know, is like, whilst yes, I will celebrate going through a slam. I think I was saying Jake Nathan about this the other day at Genesis of like, if I lose, it's fine. I'm not going to be like, oh my God,
you did.
Yeah, like as my Instagram story said, which was again literally I wrote it as he was going on stage, and I said, if Jake, like I did scored well in that slam.
Yeah.
It was final poems, like first poet goes up, got a respectable score.
Yeah.
I went up and say, oh, I got all 9s. Okay, that was a good score.
Yeah, that was a good score.
Yeah,
well done.
And then my Instagram story was like, as long as Jake Nathan goes up and doesn't do his Grenfell poem, I might be able to win this slam. Jake Nathan does his Grenfell poem, and me like, oh, fuck off. But like very tongue-in-cheek, jokingly, that thing of like, I can support him, like, you did good. It's a great poem. As long as I regularly will mention. Yeah, go.
No, finish your sentence.
I regularly will mention a UK slam a while ago, UK Slam Championships, and I was keeping up the scores going into the final round, and like, okay, top 3 go through to the final round. Going into that last poet, I was...
Sorry.
You're fine. But yeah, going into that last poet, so I was currently third. I was like, okay, cool, as long as I can beat this last poet, I get through to the final round.
Yeah.
And part of the... to do another poem after that, which is part of my internal competition. But like, okay, if I do bet this last poet, I can go through. Last poet is Rachel Nakuru.
Right.
Who does her poem about being a queer, disabled black woman.
Right. And so ticks more boxes than you.
And, like, and obviously, it's legitimately a good poem, and Rachel is a legitimately fantastic poet. So like, it was a great poem anyway.
Yeah.
But there's also that thing of like, well, that's gonna win, fine. But like, I'm comfortable with like, yeah, fine. It was actually a better poem. It won. It should go through. She won the night. Well, it's all great. But like, my point is, I like healthy competition, and I think it is good to have healthy competition. And with that as well, especially for slams, and my tangent for audiences is, I think poets bring a better performance at slams a lot of the time. In as much as a lot of poets are trying to win the slam, therefore they are putting on a not proper performance, that's a bad way of phrasing it, but like, they are...
It's more crafted sometimes, yeah. And
like, not that open mics or anything else don't bring good performances, but there was if you are an audience member coming to a show, there is one show here where everyone is trying out their best stuff and putting on their best versions of themselves, arguably.
Yeah.
Reducing it down to what it can be. Or you got this event here where someone wrote the poem on the way here. It's going to be a bit shit. They're going to be looking at their phone the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's part of why I like the competition. I like someone putting their all into it.
Yeah.
Is my thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. No, I also had a thought in the middle and then I told you to finish your thought and I forgot my thoughts. Yeah. It's also, you and I've talked about this before about what audiences are looking for on that night, what they're going to connect with is like sometimes people are really there for feminism one night and then you know the next month they're like they clearly all just connect with comedy and that's it, and then the next time it's like something's happened in politics and people only want like Brexit poems or whatever.
You also then got things like where you fall in the slam, like, oh, you've done your serious poem right after the funny poem, and sometimes that works really well for you, or sometimes like, I was still recovering from that serious poem, and therefore your funny poem is just not going to land, despite how good it is, and like...
Yeah, that is legit. That is really hard. Yeah, I remember, actually, the first time you would have seen me perform, I did a poem about sexual assault at Spoken Word London, and I was the penultimate person before the interval, so someone went after me and then there was an interval and like people kept saying to me during the interval, oh, like no one heard that other poem because we were still reeling from yours, no one was listening. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to hear that my poem was so impactful that you didn't listen to the next brilliant poem. Like that's not a compliment. But then I'm also thinking maybe I shouldn't perform that poem anymore if it's like, scene stealing is the wrong word, but like if, you know, that's also what's interesting about like what Hunter and Shah Bailey do with the Big Quit Poetry Show is that like knowing the type of poets they're programming and curating a night that balances that. It's really hard to create a balance at poetry night. That was also a tangent that wasn't a direct answer. This is also how a conversation goes sometimes, is that you'll say something and then I'll say something completely different and then I'll decide exactly.
That's what, again, the more I research and do podcast stuff, the more it's people just talking. Like I spent a whole while going over like how to make a podcast work, what are the segments and things, and like how professional you have to be as a host. And it's like, oh, you're just talking. You are literally just talking. It's just having a conversation. I can do that then.
But that's what people like about Process. It's just you and I being chaotic besties all night.
But also with that as well, I think going to the slam side of things, I think it's actually a really good thing because like in having the host there, I think they can also help. Yes, the competition is the gimmick and gets people in the door and get into it. The host relieve the pressure on it, and I think a good host, especially in a slam, can hopefully make you feel less pressured about like, yes, someone's winning it, but like it's fine, we're cool, and you're a buffer between it, and you can have the games with the audience to kind of not break it all down.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what I was going to say is that's actually the difference between the final in 2017 Genesis final and the Genesis final 2022 that we were both in, because I also didn't get through the first round, but all of my friends did. So I was like, fuck yeah, guys. And then I just got to support my friends all night and I didn't feel like shit at all. So proof that I enjoy poetry more when I'm not putting the pressure to win. I still will compete in a slam, but only Genesis. I've said that I don't think I'd compete in any other slam. Maybe I would, but I probably wouldn't feel great about it.
Obviously, so much of this conversation has centered around poetry slams, but obviously competition isn't just in slams. And I'm not going into anything, trust me, I'm not going into where you think I'm going on that one. Especially looking at page and stage, a lot of the stage side of things is the poetry slams, but in the page side of things, you obviously have so many writing competitions and writing journals, etc. So like, whilst writing competitions by their definition are competitions, they are competitive. So like, that seems to almost get a pass a lot of the time when it comes to people talking about competition. So like, is it any different with writing competitions and anything like that?
In what way?
In terms of like how we view slams and how we review writing competitions, and like, is the competition in writing competitions different to it is in poetry competitions? With slams.
It's still subjective, but I think it depending on the competition, I think it takes into account there's often a more rigorous, I say often, it depends, but in the major ones there's certainly a much more rigorous process of assessment. So like for example, the Verity Bargate Award, which is one of the major playwriting awards in the UK, goes through 2 stages of being read by various theatre professionals across the UK, and then a shortlist will go to judges who are like leading industry professionals, like, and people who've been involved in the award in some way before, but people who, like, Phoebe Waller-Bridge was a judge last year, and not Stephen Moffat's in my head because someone was talking about him last night. Not him, the other one, the better one.
God.
Who wrote Doctor Who and created
Russell T Davies.
So, thank you, Russell T Davies. Russell T Davies was a judge one year. Like, people who have read and written so many scripts by now, they know in and out what, and they're not just judging on how good it is, they're judging on how that it's you know, what audiences will think based on their decades of experience in how plays work and how scripts work. And sometimes plays win the Verity Bargate Award that I don't love, but I can see why they won, or that I think, you know, like if I knew one of the plays on the shortlist and then it didn't win and I liked the one on the shortlist better than the one I saw, but I went, you know, but going, okay, I still understand why they chose that winner. And likewise with I also think it's slightly different because there's money involved, or like not money. I take that back. There's a tangible award. So like the Verity Bargate, you win a lump sum, and also they produce your play. It gets published. It sometimes tours. If it gets picked up by a commercial producer, like you get something tangible from that will in a big way affect your career as a playwright. I think, but then some, you know, smaller, like I won second place in a short story competition that was just like a really small book festival, and I was like, that most likely was like a panel of readers that just decided which one they liked best. But I still got the entire shortlist was published, and I won a sum of money for winning second place. So, but everyone on the shortlist had their story published in an anthology. So there's something tangible that comes out of that. I think bragging rights doesn't really mean that much, really. Like I don't know if I believe. Sometimes I say things and then I'm like, maybe that was a thesis. That was maybe a hypothesis and not something I actually believe.
I will.
But I do think there's something different about that. Something about like, it's all subjective. It is, and like the plays that win awards, scripts that win awards, that most of the time playwriting awards come with a production. So that will be the winner will be and then a produced play. And then you get press coming to see it, and sometimes they hate it. So, you know, does that mean that they chose the wrong script, or does it mean that you can't always tell from a script what a play will feel like when it's alive on stage?
My 2 comments on this initially are, I think I've said it to a few people before, but like one of my favourite ever slams I did was the Axis slam. The slamming crew, I forgot what the application thing for it was, but essentially anyone could be up for it for the most part.
Right.
You had to annoyingly pay for your way to get to crew, if memory serves. Right. So you're paying to get to crew, paying for accommodation for the night. But the winner of that slam was, if you won that slam, you then got to do a feature gig in Liverpool and Glasgow and Edinburgh, and something else. I can't remember what the other one was, but like, so like, and I did that and I won that slam, which was great. And that thing of like, that was my favourite.
I love you and support you in everything that you do. Carry on.
the winner of winning that was like, cool, that helped me get to places and things I wasn't able to go to. So like it was a thing to take me beyond there. So I guess now, as a tangent and to finish off this let's talk about section, without going into too many specifics because I know it's going to go into a dangerous territory. Yes. You've got those like prestigious writing awards that therefore are tangible. So I guess with competition and spoken word, and because this is, whilst not officially but primarily more of a spoken word podcast, you've then got some awards in spoken word. Some are big, some are smaller, etc. To make it not too pointed at anyone at the moment. You do.
They're gonna know.
I know, but I was gonna more go for things like, legitimately one of the talking points at the moment is also the Forward Prize. And the Forward Prize opened up to have a spoken word. There's a category this year.
Yes, I saw that.
So there is that, again, competition there. And like, my point was going to be, and it is a level of, in looking at all the things, you've got the Forward Prize, which has got its small panel of judges, and they're going to decide what the best spoken word performance that they saw is. But at the same time, it also feels a bit like, I mean, yay that we are forward level and we're loving that. But it is going to be similar to that thing of like, today this panel chose that, and then tomorrow that poem could go in a slam and be out in the first round. So like, I guess just general thoughts on A, Forward Prize, except in spoken word, and just B, I guess award shows in general, but you can choose how far you go into that one.
Oh, I don't even know, you know. I kind of wonder who's on the panel for that.
I know at least Joelle Taylor was on the panel for Forward.
Okay, sure. She won. They?
I think still she. I don't know.
Joelle won.
Yes.
Won the Forward Prize for Kunto.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think there is something to be said for previous prize winners being judges, because I think that sort of knowing what it's like to put your being still in that place where you're still putting your stuff out there in a sort of big earlier way. Maybe, I don't know. I think because it's new, it's kind of hard to tell. But I do think I like the fact that Forward are acknowledging that spoken word, that speaking poetry aloud is a big part of literature.
The oral tradition.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's an important part of literature, and, you know, where literature came from in the first place, because spoken language is tens of thousands of years older than written language. If I say that one more time. But it
Get
is,
on a t-shirt.
Yeah, I should make a t-shirt. But it is true. Like, you know, people weren't fucking writing things down in, you know, the Bible was passed down orally for generations, and then someone wrote it down eventually. So I think it's great that they're including it, that they're acknowledging that it's not an afterthought. It's part of the world of literature. But, you know, plenty of great novels never won prizes. Plenty of great films never won prizes. Empire Records, I think, is one of the greatest films ever made. And like 5 people have seen it. So, you know, plenty of art goes completely unacknowledged.
My favourite poets haven't necessarily won awards. Some of my favourite poets on the scene are not slam-winning poets. The amount of times I've been to a slam, it's like, that was my favourite poem, and that poem did not even make it through the first round. An audience gave it a 6 or whatever. And like, but how did you not see what I hear what I heard?
But then there's also like, there's something to be said for simplicity as well, of like that William Carlos Williams poem, Oh, This Is Just to Say. Have you heard that poem? It's like 6 lines long. It's the one about plums.
I know. I'm aware.
Yeah,
I'm aware.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
Visual.
Do you hate that poem?
I nothing it.
I love that poem. It's so silly. And it's not like, I can love it and not think it's great literature, but then I think that does make it great literature, because I'm like, what a silly poem that is now like studied in school. Just some dude nicked someone's plums from the icebox and apologised for it. But I love it. I think it's an extraordinary poem, and it doesn't do anything special, but no one else has done that. Like, silly poems, man. it doesn't. Yeah, sometimes it's not that deep, and I love that poem was like, it's not that deep, but I nicked your plums, soz.
Like, I think just to wrap up this section, I feel like with slams, with writing competitions, with award shows, with a lot of that, they do seem to veer towards it has to mean something and say something. And even though I already prefaced this whole thing with starting off like, oh, it's something to too surface level, blah, 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 there is a level of, no, sometimes just the dumb fun ones, like, give me that more. And I don't think...
Yeah. But I don't think this is just to say it's a surface level poem. But I don't think it is at all. I don't think it's... But I know what you mean. I don't think it's surface level. It's surface level in that it's just saying, sorry, I stole your plums. But I think the fact that someone put that in a poem and gave it line breaks, and like the line breaks really give you the tone of voice that person is using. It's kind of like the way that we text. Like, it's comical and sweet, and like someone thought to write that. And I think that makes it not surface level.
To it isn't necessarily the words itself, but how they are laid out, how they are used, etc. If you will,
and even the fact that they wrote it.
Yeah,
like the fact that someone wrote a poem. Like, oh god, someone came to protest last month that I think stopped halfway through their set to be like, it sounds like I'm making fun of poetry. I'm not. But one of their poems was literally one word, and I was like, yeah, that's great, because it's funny. And I get what that person's about.
Ra does that a lot as well. Like,
Ra Petherbridge's poems. Yeah. Extraordinary in that way. And people really enjoy it and love it and get a sense of who Ra is from it. Even if it's just silly nothingness.
I'm very aware that, like, especially when I was booking, it's one of the few... we have gone through how I can be bitchy with how I book features, etc.
Yeah.
And like Ra was almost the exception of like so much of the time I'm like, I want to see them a couple more times, etc. I saw Ra once at Elle's book launch. I was like, we're booking her. We're doing that. That was that. Yeah. No,
that set was perfect. Yeah.
Like you need people that are doing different things, and I don't think poetry is always great for that. But before I go into it, that's a different section, conversation for another day. We're now going to move into our final section of the day called Slow Fire Questions.
Slow Fire Questions?
Yes.
I've already done quick fire, so this
I know.
Good. Great.
Kill. So, for slow fire questions, the premise of this is simple. I like my quick fire questions, and some of them I want to expand on because they're interesting potentially to dive into.
Okay.
So, in a style of quick fire questions almost, we're going to go through 5 random questions on here and give them a bit more time and find out more of the answer for it. So, let's start by giving me a random number in between 1 and 100.
7.
Perfect. Ooh, interesting one to start off with. Who is your favourite poet?
My favourite poet?
Yeah, starting simple.
Oh my god. I can't say anything without offending everyone. I don't know is the answer to that. I don't know. I used to say Sarah Kay, and I still think that's probably true, but I haven't read her poems in a while. I think it's probably still true. I think I maybe have said that last time. Also you. I mean, just my friends, really. Like, I could write a list of my friends, and it's just them. Oh no, this is really putting pressure on me. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
No.
I'm just going to say Sarah Kay because, although actually... No, I can't say anything without upsetting everyone.
Give me another number.
Okay, 3.
Favourite spoken word night?
It is Process, but that is a bias. I run it. Like but I also like love the poets that come and love the community that we've created. I keep saying, I don't know how we've done this. We feel like we did it by accident, and everyone's like, it doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like you guys craft this night that way on purpose. I know that's really like egotistical and narcissistic of me, but like it's my favourite poetry night. I know that I have to say that because I run it, but it's great and I love it.
This is very much the whole self-congratulatory.
Yeah, not even a humble brag. I've not been humble about it. We're a good team.
We put on a good night. It's a good event. Like I've been to a lot of events, and like I'm I've been to enough events to say that there are so many other events that I like what they're doing, and there are things that I would love to take from other events. Like I shout out the Loud Poets team because I love what they're doing with poetry. I love, like, whilst obviously I've got all the media shit I'm doing, they are taking that to a different level to me, and I love and adore that. I love how professionally they handle a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
I love that they've got a championship belt that they bring to nights, and I think Process needs one, but that's a different topic for a different day.
I also really, there are other poetry nights I like. I love that goddamn Poetry Jam. I love Genesis Slam. I really loved Spoken Word London when it was on. Did it die?
It did die. It died.
And then someone started a new one called Spoken Word London. I'm like, you're not though.
No, like Spoken Word London died. Talking to the people involved with it, it feels like the people. It's in a similar vein to Boomerang, a level of people have moved on to do different things, so we can't bring it back. And
that happens. Sad. I really loved it.
Give me another number, please.
29.
Do you have a TV in your room?
No, I have an iPad that I watch Netflix on.
Like,
next. No.
No further comments here on it. Okay, cool. No. Give me another number, please.
90. Oh, no, I'm going to be really childish. 69.
Nice. What is your takeaway of choice?
There's a Chinese place near me that is really, really good. Or KFC.
Yes.
Sorry, I had so much KFC during lockdown. Yeah.
On random tangents on this, and call back to you talking about how, like, beforehand, well, nowadays, like, almost every other one of your friends is non-binary.
Yeah.
I am so used to every one of my friends being vegetarian or vegan to some degree that the fact, like, not that I wouldn't love you already, but the fact that you are not, and the fact that we can go Five Guys together. We can have that together. Like, I'm not saying that makes you a better friend, but, like, I can enjoy that.
You're going to alienate all the vegan poets.
Everybody. I already have. I know my poetry.
But people think I'm vegetarian, or people just assume I'm vegetarian constantly.
You're a queer poet. You must be vegetarian.
I know. It's like, you work in theatre. And like my brother was like, oh, you've got vegetarian vibes or a vegetarian aura or something. I'm like, no, I absolutely eat meat. I was vegetarian for a short time in my final year of uni. And then I felt really sick all the time. So I started eating meat again, and I stopped feeling sick all the time.
You go.
Sorry.
We'll do 2 more of these. So give me another number, please.
42.
42, meaning of life.
Yeah.
Will poetry ever be mainstream?
Probably not. To be really honest. Probably not. I think it should be. I think poetry should be mainstream. Actually, no. I tell a lie. I do think it is. I think it's already mainstream, because I say this all the time. Simon and Garfunkel are fucking poets. Like, there are some musicians whose lyrics are fucking poetry, and I'm not saying like that in the sense of like poetry is better than music, but like, listen to any Simon and Garfunkel song. Like, Sound of Silence is a perfect example. I know it's like all cliche now because, you know, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend, whatever.
Also,
it is
you
a bit
have
of
the
a cliche, but like
cover as well.
The Disturbed cover is extraordinary though.
I know, I love it.
It's so good. But that song, like, the lyrics are so beautiful, and like I think music is mainstream. Sorry, poetry is mainstream because it exists in lyrics that you can, you know, print out and it's a poem. Like, when my older sister had her first kid, when he was a baby, there was one day when he wouldn't stop crying. So I recited Green Day lyrics to him. I think it was Basket Case. I just recited them like they were Shakespeare, and he fell asleep. So I think poetry exists in like in other media. But I don't think otherwise poetry is going to ever be mainstream. But I don't think not everything needs to be. I don't think like, there's a lot of things I don't think are mainstream, and like, that's okay.
I was reminded the other day when doing this, the thing of like, the balance of this is like, poetry is taught in every single school. There are so many weddings that have poems in them, etc.
Yeah.
And that thing of almost the question now is almost, what do I mean by mainstream? I don't even know my own answer to that. Or thing of like, I've got it in my dumb question. This thing of like, oh yeah, like poetry is everywhere, but also it's not seen as mainstream, which is a weird spot for it to be. But let's move on to our last question. Give me a number. Number. Yes, words. Another number.
How old are you now?
31.
31.
What is your proudest moment in poetry? I don't know what that sound was.
What, the sound I made? Or
yes,
you made?
You.
I think last time you asked me that, I said winning Genesis Slam. I think... maybe getting my second collection published by Verve, or maybe like that and process, like definitely running the community that we've created together. And I think I felt it most last month, because there were people that have only been coming for a few months but are clearly like people that are going to be there every time and feel like just as much part of the process family as people who've been coming since day one. And I just feel like we've created the poetry night that I always wanted. It really feels like a community and a family. And like, that's not what everyone wants in poetry, but it's what we want. And I think it's really nice and really lovely and validating to know that other people also really value that in spoken word and poetry. Yeah.
I think that's a wholesome and lovely way to end this podcast.
Wholesome and lovely, that's me.
Exactly. That's exactly the two words I used to describe you.
I just want everyone to know, people who are listening to this and not watching it, that Tyrone is wearing a pale pink sleeveless Barbie t-shirt, which is funny because when the Barbie promo stuff got announced, he shared pictures of us as Barbie and Ken, with mine saying she is everything.
He's just Ken.
And his said he's just Ken, but he didn't tell me he was doing that. And I was like, nope, I hate this. Take it down. Stop it. I didn't tell him to take it down, but it was funny in an unexpected way. Anyway, he's wearing that t-shirt and it looks great.
And I'll be wearing it at Process because I will be.
Promise?
My only slight caveat is if I'm watching the Barbie movie on the Sunday before Process.
Okay.
This podcast will come out after, so this is now irrelevant and whatever. But nevertheless, I'm watching the Barbie movie on the Sunday before Process. And basically,
so
if the Barbie movie is good, this stays on. If the Barbie's not good, we'll see. But it'll probably still be on as well. Nevertheless, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
As I've been saying, your camera is there. If you want to be found online, let people know where they can find you. If not, we don't have to do that.
I really just wanted one. I wanted one good burp down the mic. It was all right.
Smoothly done.
I am at Kayla TMF, T for Tango, M for Mike, F for Foxtrot on social media, or at KaylaFeldman.com for everything else. Where else can you find me? In person, you can find me at Process on the last Tuesday of every month, except for that one time in December. Yeah. Is that it? Is that the end?
Well, now I need to just do outro to camera / to the microphone so you can all hear me. I don't know why when I move closer, I also change the voice. That defeats the purpose of moving closer to the mic. It literally does. Nevertheless, this has been the Process Podcast. As always, as ever, please do it. Follow us on all the socials, on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the threads by that point, probably. I don't know. We'll see how Twitter and threads last survive. This is going to be a wonderfully out of date podcast now. That's great. Oh well. But find us on all the socials. We have Process Productions on all the things. Support us on Patreon. If you do, you can get this early. You can get our other videos earlier. You can help run this thing because I like doing this and I think people like this and this would be a good thing. And Patreon helps us do that. So please support and all that. Otherwise, good night. Good morning, good evening, good whenever you're listening to this.
All right, Truman.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night, goodbye, au revoir, c'est la vie, blah, 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 words. Bye.